I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. During Senate floor remarks on Thursday, Senator Ron Wyden advocated for the Expanding Access to Family Planning Act, which would increase funding to family planning services, including providing birth control. Wyden called out his Republican colleagues, saying, quote, "You can't be pro-life and pro-family if you're against health care that saves lives and protects families." Wyden also praised Senator Mazie Hirono for the My Body, My Data Act. Hirono says the measure would ensure women's private data and information will not be weaponized against them. Here's more from the Oregon Democrat.
I want to thank my colleague from Hawaii for making these very important remarks today with respect to expanding access to family planning. And Senator Hirono, let me also, Senator Hirono, while you're on the floor, tell you how much I appreciate your leadership on the My Body, My Data Act. I'm thrilled to be, I believe, one of your sponsors here in the Senate. It is hugely consequential because we have known from even the draft Alito opinion that women were going to have their personal data weaponized against them. So I know you have a busy schedule, but I just wanted the body to know how extraordinarily important this is, because when we look at technology, and particularly what technology can do today, what your legislation does with our colleague from the House, Congresswoman Jacobs, gives us a chance to get back to the fundamental issue of privacy rights. We're going to start looking more at the contractual relationships between women and various companies, because a lot of those privacy policies aren't worth the paper they're written on. But I just want you to know I'm so honored to be your co-sponsor on a very related piece of legislation. Your leadership has made a big difference.
Mr. President.
Senator from Hawaii.
Just very briefly, Senator Wyden, I'm really glad to be able to sponsor the My Body's My Data bill with you, because as we know, anytime any of us presses the button and use our internet, somebody's collecting data, all of this data. And can you imagine, there are all these clinics that purportedly provide information relating to contraception and whatever else relating to reproductive care. These entities are also collecting all kinds of information, and they are not there to make sure that women who, mainly women, but individuals who access their services, they do not know that these are not institutions that will give them all of the information they need, but instead they are collecting a lot of information that can be weaponized. So thank you very much. This is yet another whole area of concern in this environment, in this climate where individuals do not have control over our own bodies. Thank you.
I just say to my colleague, sometimes it's a little difficult to figure out where a piece of legislation is going. That's not the case with your bill. My Body, My Data sums it up. And again, thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I also want to briefly touch on the important legislation that Senator Smith, my Pacific Northwest colleagues, Senator Murray and Senator Warner, have recently introduced. They have an important proposal called the Expanding Access to Family Planning Act. I'm proud to co-sponsor this legislation. This is another area where Chair Murray and I work very closely together, because a lot of these issues can often involve Medicaid, for example. And I just so appreciate my colleague bringing up her important bill with respect to family planning. The proposition behind this is pretty straightforward. The Supreme Court overturned Roe against the will of the American people. States are criminalizing abortion. Many women and girls are now being forced to carry pregnancies to term and give birth. If you're going to stand by this forced birth agenda, then you better guarantee basic health for women and families. That is really Senator Murray's challenge to Senate Republicans. You can't be pro-life and pro-family if you're against health care that saves lives and protects families. The Murray legislation with Senator Smith and Senator Warren, I'm pleased to be for it today, is centered on a significant increase in what's known as Title X funding. which goes to basic essential services like HIV tests, contraception, treatment for infections, and pregnancy counseling. And one of those services is really so vitally important, I just want to mention it, and that is cancer screenings. And cancer screenings are a particularly important issue now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe, because over the last few weeks there have been a wave of these horrendous stories, as Senator Murray knows better than anyone, about the chaos this radical Supreme Court ruling has unleashed on women's health care. Drawn-out miscarriages, potentially fatal complications left untreated, physicians unsure of what treatments they're legally allowed to perform. And we know one of the absolute nightmares for women living in forced birth states is getting pregnant and having cancer at exactly the same time. And the question is, in a world where a miscarriage could lead to criminal charges, how do you treat a pregnant woman with cancer? So we ought to think about that. And could getting chemo be a crime in a forced birth state, Senator Murray? In forced birth states, how many Americans are going to die because they waited too long to begin treatment for breast cancer or cervical cancer, or because they didn't maybe get treated at all? It is appalling that Americans are facing this kind of awful, I think, unthinkable situation, all because 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court threw 50 years of settled law on abortion rights into the dustbin. So in the parlance of the Senate, Senator Murray, let me yield to you. I think your legislation is extraordinarily important. I got to reverse some parlance of the Senate and yield to Senator Klobuchar, who also has been a champion of this issue. And I just want the Senate to know, because we're in the Pacific Northwest, we talk about these issues, people ought to make no mistake about it. Senator Murray has put years and years into the cause of women's health. And I really enjoy being a junior partner in the whole effort and look forward to her leadership. And I yield to Senator Klobuchar.